Section 7 of the Terrorism Act is linked to Section 6, which is very clear that it has to do with advancing a religious, ethnic, or sectarian cause, or you are trying to intimidate or coerce or overawe the government or the public or a section of the public. Now, you will notice that within the order, the Islamabad High Court has not exempted Mr. Khan from the other provisions under the Pakistan Penal Code, which have to do with things like criminal intimidation and disobeying the order of a government servant. But the most offensive aspect, which was the gratuitous use of the anti-terrorism law, that for the time being has been neutralized, and that is in accordance with the law as well as the scheme of the Anti-Terrorism Act. So that's a very good question. Certainly, if you are to construe such an offense and turn it into something as heinous as terrorism, keeping in mind also Pakistan's recent history, where you were up against an insurgency which was causing an existential threat to the integrity of your federation, to go back to the 90s. In fact, I would say we've maybe even regressed beyond the 90s if we're using laws like terrorism, is 100% a step in the wrong direction. This is something that the Islamabad High Court order also makes reference to. The judgment it has cited is Ghulam Hussain versus State, which was a 7-member judgment of the Supreme Court, which was very clear. It said that no matter how brutal or gruesome or shocking an act may be, that does not mean that it necessarily falls within the ambit of Section 6 of the Terrorism Act, which you then join with Section 7. Does it advance an ethnic or a sectarian cause? Does it advance extremisms? Is it an attempt to overawe the public or the servants of the state? So this is something that we need to get beyond. It certainly has a terrible effect on our convictions, because our convictions, and this is a hard reality that our justice system is going to have to face at some point, is directly linked to the quality of prosecution. If the prosecution decides to invoke such baseless provisions within laws that are meant to sound much more serious than the actual crime was, then you are looking at a recipe for acquittal in a country where the rate of acquittal is also sky high. The Anti-Terrorism Act is misused in the way that this mindset misuses the law. We've seen that even though you may have a hammer, not every problem is a nail. For the longest time, the government of Pakistan has decided to throw different special courts at the matter. We saw in the 90s, with a rise in sectarian attacks, the anti-terrorism courts. Then we saw around 2014, the protection of Pakistan courts. Finally, after 2015, we saw via constitutional amendment, military courts. The idea being that specialized alternative judicial systems can deliver speedy justice in a place where that system may be failing. Now, this is an incredibly counterproductive thing to do, because that means that you are already conceding that the civilian justice system cannot be repaired either in the short term or the long term, and it is eventually the civilian justice system, or rather the regular criminal justice system, that you will have to return to once these special courts are wrapped up. The anti-terrorism courts still remain, but as you know, the protection of Pakistan and military courts have been wound up. To then insert provisions in FIRs of your political opponents to try and exacerbate the nature of what they've done, I think is basically a disaster. It is classic political persecution, and I don't think you can use any other expression for it. Post 2006, we seem to have been going towards something of a democratic consensus. That democratic consensus did not necessarily mean that you forgive blatant offenses or white-collar crimes or anything of the sort. It meant that you would not persecute the opposition when you were in government to the extent that you destabilize the entire country and perpetuate that cycle. Now that the PTI is in power in Punjab and KP, and the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz and its coalition parties are in charge. In Islamabad, we are seeing tit for tat FIRs. We are seeing basically one party trying to outdo each other in terms of the criminal cases that are being filed. This also undermines the nature of serious criminal cases that are against very many political leaders, at least in the ambit of white-collar crime, amongst other things. And you can just shake a stick at the entire judicial system and say that all of these cases must be politically engineered or frivolous. And we've seen that happen over the past few years. So this tells us how important it is to inculcate some sort of a culture of call it constitutionalism, call it due process, but the need not to persecute your opponents, keep the system going, but also then not do what we've seen with the PDM government, go to the other extreme and make sure that no crime, no matter how open and shut, is prosecuted ever. So we're swinging between two extremes, and I fear it's very, very unfortunate for this country.